Thank you for joining me today on my YouTube channel, and this is part 3 of shame. And part 1 of shame, I share with you my journey of shame. It was secondhand shame, shame from my earthly father's secret criminal life that was exposed. Part 2 of shame was I shared with you a person in the Bible, Judah, and how he trafficked his own brother, Joseph. He sold him into slavery. And, we talked a lot about that last time. And so today we're going to continue with Judah's story. So the rest of Judah's story can be found in Genesis chapter 38, 43, 44, 46, and 49. Now, Judah had gotten away with the perfect crime, right? I mean, his lies were so believable. He had that false evidence that he twisted in his favor, Joseph's bloody coat. So everybody around him thought that Joseph was dead. He had the proof of it. And so he is living his life. And in the Bible, when we come across the rest of Judah's life, there are 2 different situations in which he is in a desperate situation. Okay? A desperate situation. And, when you are in a desperate situation, the real person comes out, right? Desperate people do desperate things. And so we're going to take a look at these 2 desperate situations that Judah was in. Okay, the first desperate situation is actually in Genesis chapter 38. And this is when Judah gets older. He moves away from home, and he starts his own life. Okay, so he starts his own life. Nobody knows that about his secret, about how he is a human trafficker and how he did horrible things to his brother. Nobody knows that, and he's living with his secret. He marries a woman named Shua, and they have 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. And so it's a typical family of 5, right? I mean, families have ups and downs. And Judah's family had really had gotten a lot of downs. He had come across a lot of loss in his life. He now found himself to be a single dad. He was a widower, and he was a single dad. He had lost his wife died, and 2 of his sons died. And so it was just down from a family of 5 to a family of 2. It was just him and his youngest son, Shelah. And there are a lot of empty chairs at the dinner table. There's lots of loss. Judah is experiencing the loss that his father experienced. Jacob, his father, lost one of his wives, and he lost one of his sons. And so Judah was getting a taste of what that was like. And he was grief-stricken. And on this particular day, he is going to a job, and he doesn't go to this job by himself. He's with his son, Shelah, and with his friend, Hira. And there is a woman that he sees, a prostitute that he sees. And so he is grief-stricken. He is trying to fill this void, right? And he's going about it through sexual, perverse, ungodly ways. He solicits a prostitute. Now, we can see that this situation that Judah did, this was not a prostitute that he ran into every time he was going to this job site, okay? This was not something that he planned on doing. He didn't wake up that morning and think, okay, I'm going to solicit a prostitute today, okay? He acts on a whim. Doesn't that sound familiar? We talked about last time when he did this human trafficking, when he was the ringleader of this human trafficking. This wasn't premeditated. He was acting on a whim. With the human trafficking, it was acting on a whim of jealousy, a negative emotion, right? Now he's acting on a whim of a negative emotion, this loss, he's grief-stricken, and he's trying to fill this void in the most ungodly, perverse ways. And you can also see the contrast between Judah's sex crime and then Joseph, his brother, alleged sex crime, which is found in the very next chapter, Genesis chapter 39. Both guys, we've got the victim, Joseph, and we've got the perpetrator, Judah. And Joseph and Judah are both experiencing tremendous loss, trauma. And the way these two men handle their trauma are polar opposites. Joseph, there is this woman in Joseph's day-to-day life that keeps coming on to him, that keeps tempting him, that keeps seducing him. And he says no, 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 every single time. He is going to fill his void through his relationship with his Heavenly Father. He does have a relationship with his Heavenly Father. He's getting that through his dad, right? Judah and Joseph are growing up in the same household, okay? Now, granted, they do have two different mothers, but they have the same father. And those two mothers came from the same family. And so Joseph does have a relationship with his Heavenly Father. It's interesting when you're reading in Genesis, what's this relationship look like? Well, with Joseph and Judah's great grandfather, Abraham, it was this talking with God, right? We see this. Abraham and then Isaac, their grandfather, talking with God. And then with Jacob, the communication's different. It's through dreams. Jacob is that's how God is communicating through him, through dreams. Now, I don't really know the significance of that as far as present day, but we can see how the communication is changing through the Old Testament. And so Joseph is actually getting that too, like his dad. And so you can see that he's really, funneling his loss into his Heavenly Father. And Judah is doing this through, physical, sexual perversion. And so that's the first desperate situation that we find Judah in. So the second desperate situation that Judah finds himself in is that years later, he actually moves back home with his dad, with his mom, with his stepmoms, and with his brothers. Everybody's there, and this family of 18, this family of origin that he came from was originally a family of 18, and has grown bigger as the sons have married, as children are born into the family, grandchildren. And so this family of 18 is now a family of 73. 73. And they are experiencing a very desperate situation. Hunger. When we're hungry, we're not very, easy to get along with, right? That is a very desperate situation. And when you have kids involved, a very desperate situation. And so Jacob, their father, Judah's father, is saying, well, I've heard that there is food that we can get but we have to travel to Egypt. And so lots of times in the Bible there's famine, and this really allows people to move, right? To have to travel. And so this really prompted a traveling. And all the sons went except for Benjamin. Now Benjamin was the only son that was not involved with that human trafficking incident that was involved with Joseph. So he didn't go, but it was the other 10 sons, including Judah. And so Judah and his brothers are there standing in line, getting food just like everybody else. And the governor of Egypt is pretty much singles them out. Singles Judah out, the 10 brothers, and Judah doesn't know what's going on. I mean, the governor is asking them lots of questions, and is just very rough with them. And Judah and his brothers are thrown into prison. They're in prison for 3 days, and they don't know what's going to happen to them, right? After the 3 days, the governor says, I want you to bring that youngest brother that didn't come with you. I want you to bring him back here, okay, to Egypt. But he gave all of them food. He gave them all food, and he gave it to them for free. He put their money back in their sacks and gave it to them. And but the thing is, it's not all 10 brothers that went back to Jacob. The governor is keeping one of the brothers, Simeon. So Simeon is in prison, and in order to get Simeon out, they got to produce Benjamin to the governor. So they go back and they tell their dad about what's going on. And long story short, when you read those chapters, when you read chapter 43, when you read chapter 44, you are going to see a different Judah. A Judah who is very truthful. You know, when we looked at last time with, he was human trafficking his brother, Joseph. Judah was different when his dad was around, okay? Judah didn't let on when his dad was around that he was feeling very angry towards his brother. He didn't show that when his dad was around, but he showed that when Joseph was around. Joseph knew that. Judah is just lying, deceiving. It's all about him. And this Judah, when he is his communication we see his communication going on with the governor of Egypt. We see his communication going on with his dad and his brothers. We see this communication going on with the steward. It's basically the governor of Egypt, his right-hand man. And when you see that communication going on, he is the same person with all three individuals. There is truth. And it's amazing because, he's telling this truth, and, it's hard for his dad to believe. For instance, he goes back to his dad when the governor sends him back and says, you need to produce Benjamin in order to get Simeon, your other brother, out of prison. And so he goes to his dad, and he's telling him all this truth, right? And his dad is having a hard time understanding it, is having a hard time believing it, right? I mean, it's like when Judah was lying to his dad with that evidence that he twisted in his favor, that lie was believed more than the truth that he was telling his dad. And you see that Judah is still persisting with being a truth teller. He's still persisting through that. And Judah is very much into thinking about others, helping others. He wants to get Simeon out of prison. He wants to get Benjamin in front of the governor. He wants to make sure that he has food for this family of 73. And it's just a very different Judah. So how is the result with Judah and the solicitation of a prostitute? Well, when Judah solicited that prostitute, the prostitute deceived him. He thought he was having sex with a stranger, with a prostitute. In actuality, the prostitute knew him very well. And she was acting in revenge to get back at him. This was his daughter-in-law. His daughter-in-law, who had married his oldest son, became a widow, had married his second son, became a widow again. And she was to marry the third son. And he never did follow through with his word. And she got back at him in a very revengeful way. And this is how sick sin is. When he solicited what he thought to be a prostitute, this created new life. Not one life, but two lives. She gave birth to twins, Pharez and Zerah. How Judah handled what to be a very shameful event in his life is truly amazing. His response to this situation is one in which he comes clean with the truth. He owns up to his truth. And God rewards him for this. You know, this is not an easy thing. He could have very easily covered this up like he did all those years when he covered up that secret of trafficking his brother. But you know what? He was haunted by the look that Joseph gave him when that last time that Joseph was sent off in shackles as a slave. The horror in Joseph's eyes haunted Judah and his brothers their entire lives. They wanted to be free from that. They wanted to live lives that were peaceful, that were full of joy. And the only way they could have done that is to tap in to the special relationship that Joseph had, that Jacob had with their Heavenly Father. You know, those lists of genealogies in the Bible, they can be lists that we skip over because they are boring, right? It's just a list of names. But our Heavenly Father is very much into the details. He's in the details of everything concerning His Word. He's in the details of everything concerning our lives. And if you read in Genesis chapter 46, you're going to read the names of all 73 family members that went in and moved into Egypt, where Joseph was, to be delivered from this famine. And the amazing thing is you're going to read who accompanied Judah. In Genesis chapter 46, verse 12, you're going to read that Pharez and Zerah, the twins that came from that night, that shameful night, he lived his truth. He did not hide that. He could have very well killed the prostitute. He could have very well killed those babies living inside her, but he lived his truth. And that is one of the hidden gems in genealogies. You know, when we read those list of names, we can really get a huge glimpse into a person's life of how they really changed. When you read in Matthew chapter 1, you're going to read that Christ comes from Pharez. You're going to read all about how the people that came from the tribe of Judah, how they were instrumental in building the tabernacle. For instance, there is a guy named Bezaleel, Bezaleel. He came from the tribe of Judah, and he played a vital role in the building of the tabernacle. That's mentioned in Exodus chapter 31. You know, he had spiritual wisdom, and he had this really gifting of working with crafting and building every part of that tabernacle. You know, when we choose to live our truth, God helps us with that, and God rewards that. He blesses that. You know, our living our truthful lives, our moving past shame is what plays into his big master plan that goes on for generations to come. That is my spiritual food for you to munch on the rest of the week. I can't wait to see you next time.